The road to Blackridge hadn't changed in 10 years. The same faded billboard welcoming visitors to Oregon's hidden gem still stood at the town limits, though weather and neglect had worn away most of the pain. I rolled down my window, letting the crisp autumn air fill the car. Pine and decay, that's what Blackridge smelled like. Some things never change. My name is Noah Grayson, and I never planned to come back here. Not after my mother disappeared and my father retreated into himself, becoming the town recluse that children dared each other to spy on. But death has a way of forcing your hand. 3 days ago, I received the call that my father had passed away in his sleep. As his only living relative, it fell to me to settle his affairs. Main Street was even more depressing than I remembered. Half the storefronts stood empty, their windows covered with newspaper or plywood. The Red Pine Diner still operated, its neon sign flickering inconsistently. A handful of pickup trucks sat in the parking lot, probably the same ones that had been there when I left for college a decade ago. My father's house sat on Oakwood Drive, the last in a row of similar craftsman-style homes built during the town's brief timber boom in the 1950s. Unlike its neighbors, whose owners maintained tidy yards and fresh paint, my father's home looked abandoned. The lawn had grown wild, the mailbox leaned at a precarious angle, and the once blue paint had faded to a sickly gray. I parked my rental car in the cracked driveway and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. This wasn't just about sorting through my father's possessions. It was about confronting the past I'd been running from. With a deep breath, I grabbed my duffel bag and approached the front door. The key stuck in the lock, requiring a firm jiggle before it turned. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a dim interior that smelled of old books and something else. Something chemical I couldn't quite place. "Jesus, Dad," I muttered, taking in the scene. The living room was packed with boxes, stacks of newspapers, and technical manuals. Narrow pathways connected the rooms, barely wide enough for a person to navigate. My father had always been organized to the point of obsession during my childhood. This hoarding behavior must have developed after I left. I dropped my bag on the only clear spot on the sofa and moved deeper into the house. The kitchen was surprisingly clean but showed minimal signs of use. The refrigerator contained only condiments and a carton of milk that had expired weeks ago. In the dining room, the table had been repurposed as a workbench, covered with electrical components, soldering equipment, and hand-drawn schematics. As I moved through the house, it became clear my father hadn't been living like a normal person. The upstairs bathroom cabinet contained dozens of pill bottles, sleeping aids, anti-anxiety medications, and others I didn't recognize. His bedroom was Spartan, with just a bed and dresser, but the walls were covered with maps of Blackridge with strange markings and annotations. I was about to investigate further when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mia Langley. My stomach tightened. Mia had been my best friend growing up, until I left without saying goodbye after graduation. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Noah Grayson," her familiar voice replied. "I heard you were back in town. Red Pine Diner, 30 minutes. I'll buy you a terrible cup of coffee." Before I could respond, she hung up. Some things really never do change. The Red Pine looked exactly as I remembered. Red vinyl booths, chrome-edged tables, and the perpetual smell of burnt coffee. Mia sat in our old booth by the window, dark hair now cut in a short, practical style, a leather jacket replacing the hoodies she'd worn in high school. When she saw me, she didn't stand to hug me or even smile. She just raised an eyebrow and gestured to the seat across from her. "You look like hell," she said as I sat down. "Nice to see you too, Mia." She pushed a mug of coffee toward me. "I'm sorry about your dad." "Thanks," I replied, taking a sip. The coffee was indeed terrible. "How'd you know I was back?" "I run the Blackridge Chronicle now," she explained. "Nothing happens in this town without me knowing about it. Plus, Mrs. Henderson across the street from your dad called me the minute your rental car pulled up." "The newspaper, huh? You always said you'd be a journalist." "Well, someone has to document the slow death of this place." She leaned forward. "How long are you staying?" "Just long enough to sell the house and sort through Dad's things. A week, maybe 2. Mia nodded, something unspoken in her eyes. Your dad changed after you left, became obsessed with... The diner door banged open, cutting her off. A tall, lanky man with wild auburn hair and a patchy beard strode toward our table, eyes wide with excitement behind thick glasses. Holy shit, Noah Grayson, he exclaimed, sliding into the booth beside Mia. The prodigal son returns. Eric Dawson had been the third member of our childhood trio. Where Mia was practical and I was cautious, Eric had always been the dreamer, the one with wild theories and elaborate plans that usually got us in trouble. Eric, I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips despite myself. Still making an entrance, I see. Still wearing those boring button-ups, I see, he countered, gesturing at my shirt. Man, I can't believe you're back. Is it true you're some hotshot architect in Portland now? Civil engineer, I corrected. Nothing hotshot about it. You design bridges and stuff. That makes sense. You always were building things. Eric's eyes darted around the diner before leaning in. Have you been in the house yet? Found anything unusual? Mia kicked him under the table. Eric, not now. What? I asked, looking between them. Found what? Eric ignored Mia's warning glare. Your dad was involved in something big, Noah. The incident of '98. The whole town felt it. That wasn't any earthquake. Something happened under Blackridge. Something the government covered up. Your dad knew what it was. I sighed. Eric had always been into conspiracy theories, even as a kid. My dad was an electrician, not a secret agent. Who worked for the government on classified projects, Eric insisted, who came back to Blackridge in 1995 after being away for years, right when all those unmarked vehicles started showing up, who was one of the few people in town the night of the earthquake who didn't evacuate. Eric, Mia warned again, but I was curious despite myself. What exactly do you think happened in 1998? Eric glanced around again before answering. They built something under this town, something secret, and something went wrong. He tapped the table for emphasis. 17 people disappeared that year. Official story was they moved away because the timber industry collapsed. But they didn't move, Noah. They vanished. Mia rolled her eyes. Eric works at the library now. He spends too much time in the local history section. You've seen the evidence too, Mia, Eric protested. The geological surveys that don't match up. The power grid anomalies. I've seen your corkboard of newspaper clippings connected with red string, she retorted. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Look, I appreciate the welcome committee, but I should get back to the house. I've got a lot to sort through. We'll help, Mia offered immediately. That place is a maze now. Thanks, but I think I need to do this alone, at least at first. I stood up, dropping a few dollars on the table for the coffee. I'll call you if I need anything. As I walked away, I heard Eric call after me, check the basement, Noah. That's where it all starts. Night fell early in October, shadows lengthening across my father's cluttered home. I'd spent hours organizing his papers, finding nothing but bills, technical manuals, and subscription renewals. No will, no letter explaining the state of the house, no clues about what had happened to turn my methodical father into a hoarder. I was about to call it a night when I noticed a loose floorboard in his bedroom. Curious, I pried it up with a screwdriver and found a leather-bound journal hidden in the space beneath. The cover was worn, the pages filled with my father's precise handwriting. The first entries dated back to 1995, around the time he'd returned to Blackridge after working on government projects in Nevada. Most entries were mundane, notes about house repairs, town gossip, weather observations, but interspersed were disturbing fragments. April 3rd, 1996, Henderson, concerned about power requirements, told him the grid can't handle sustained surges without drawing attention. He doesn't care. Project timeline accelerated. September 17th, 1997, containment protocols improved, but still inadequate. They don't understand what they're dealing with. Emily agrees but won't speak up. She's too invested now. Emily, my mother's name. She'd left when I was 16, supposedly running off with someone she'd met on one of her business trips. I'd never believed it. It wasn't like her, but my father had insisted it was true. The entries grew more frantic as they approached April 1998. March 30th, 1998. Breach risk assessment. Critical. Henderson won't listen. Too many variables, too many unknowns. Emily says. The rest of the page was torn out. I flipped through frantically, finding more missing pages and abrupt endings. Then, near the end of the journal, a final entry from just 3 months ago. They're waking up. After all these years, they're waking up. The sensors don't lie. Movement in Sector 7. God help us if the seals fail. A chill ran down my spine as the house's power flickered, lights dimming momentarily before returning to full brightness. Outside, a branch scratched against the window like skeletal fingers seeking entrance. Despite myself, I thought of Eric's words. Check the basement, Noah. That's where it all starts. I'd avoided the basement all day, remembering it as a dark, unfinished space where my father had kept his tools. But now, journal in hand, I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the basement door. It had been reinforced since I'd lived here, the hollow core replaced with solid oak, a deadbolt added where there had once been a simple knob. The key hung on a hook beside the door, unlabeled but obvious in its purpose. It turned smoothly in the lock, the door swinging open to reveal concrete steps descending into darkness. I flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. Of course, I muttered, clicking on my flashlight. The beam revealed a transformed space. What had once been an ordinary basement was now filled with electronic equipment. Computers from the 90s, monitors, servers humming quietly, and a sophisticated shortwave radio setup. The walls were lined with metal shelving stocked with preserved food, water jugs, and emergency supplies. My father had built a bunker. I moved deeper into the basement, examining his setup. Most of the equipment was outdated, but well maintained. One monitor displayed what looked like seismic readings, a jagged line spiking at irregular intervals. Another showed a simple schematic of what appeared to be the town of Blackridge, with several areas highlighted in red. The concrete floor had been partially covered with old carpet remnants, worn from years of my father's pacing. As I moved a section aside with my foot, I noticed something odd, a slight depression in the floor, forming a perfect square about 3 feet on each side. Kneeling down, I ran my fingers along the edge and felt a seam. This wasn't just a depression, it was a door, built flush with the floor and carefully concealed. There was no handle, no obvious way to open it, but the seam was unmistakable. I sat back on my heels, heart pounding. Was this what Eric had been talking about? Had my father built some kind of secret room beneath the basement? As if in answer to my unspoken question, the lights in the basement suddenly came on, the equipment around me humming with increased energy. A monitor near the radio equipment flashed with a message. Perimeter breach, Sector 3, containment compromised, emergency protocol activated. Before I could process this, I heard a mechanical click from the square door in the floor. A seam of light appeared around its edge, and it rose a few inches, as if inviting me in. I should have run. Any rational person would have. But I was the son of William Grayson, who had taught me that knowledge was worth any risk, and I needed to know what my father had been hiding. I reached for my phone to call Mia and Eric. Whatever was down there, I knew I shouldn't face it alone. "This is insane," Mia whispered, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness of the tunnel that extended from the trapdoor in my father's basement. "Your dad built a secret passage under your house. Who does that?" "Someone who knew something," Eric replied, his voice tense with excitement. "I told you guys for years, something was hidden under this town." We had been walking for nearly 15 minutes through a narrow concrete tunnel, cool air flowing past us from some unseen ventilation system. The passage was clearly man-made, with electrical conduits running along the ceiling and what looked like fiber optic cables bundled alongside them. "These are military-grade materials," Eric continued, running his hand along the wall. "This wasn't built by some paranoid civilian. This is government work. And it leads somewhere under the town," I added, consulting a small town map I'd found in my father's desk. If my calculations were correct, we were currently beneath Main Street, heading toward the old Forest Service land on the outskirts of Blackridge. "The power came on by itself?" Mia asked, still skeptical despite the evidence surrounding us. As editor of the town's small newspaper, she had a healthy suspicion of extraordinary claims. "Everything lit up at once," I confirmed. Then that message appeared about a breach in something called Sector 3A, and the trapdoor just opened, she pressed. Not completely, it raised a few inches, like it was waiting for me to pull it the rest of the way. Eric snorted. Classic government failsafe, manual override in case of power failure. But the power wasn't out, I pointed out, it was restored. Maybe it was triggered by the breach, Eric suggested. Whatever that means. We fell silent as the tunnel began to widen, eventually opening into a small antechamber. The walls here were reinforced with steel plating, and a massive circular door dominated the far wall, like a bank vault, but larger. Next to it was a security panel with a keycard slot and keypad. End of the line, Mia said, turning to head back. Unless either of you happens to have the access code for a secret government facility. I approached the panel, examining it carefully. This looks like the same system they used at my father's work site in Nevada. He was always forgetting his access card. So, Eric asked. So he kept a spare, I replied, reaching into my pocket. Before leaving the house, I'd searched my father's workbench and found what I was looking for, a small metal junction box with a false bottom, hiding a keycard with my father's photo and the words, Project Prometheus, Level 4 clearance. I slid the card into the slot. The panel beeped, a green light flashed, and a message appeared on the small screen. Welcome, Dr. Grayson. Biometric verification required. Dr. Grayson. Mia raised an eyebrow. Your dad wasn't a doctor. No, I agreed, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. But my mother was. Dr. Emily Grayson. The panel suddenly blinked. Biometric override. Emergency protocol alpha. Access granted. With a hiss of hydraulics, the massive door began to swing open, revealing darkness beyond. A moment later, emergency lighting activated, bathing the space in a dim red glow. Holy shit, Eric breathed. I was right. I was right all along. Before us stretched a vast underground complex, clearly abandoned but still powered. Dust covered everything, undisturbed for what must have been decades except for a single set of footprints. My father's, I realized with a chill. We stepped through the doorway into what appeared to be a reception area. A curved desk sat in the center, computers from the 1990s still in place. Behind it, a large logo was emblazoned on the wall, a stylized flame surrounding the words Project Prometheus, where humanity evolves. What is this place? Mia whispered, her journalist's instincts clearly at war with her fear. I moved to the desk, brushing dust from one of the computer monitors. Let's find out. The computer hummed to life when I pressed the power button, its ancient hard drive whirring loudly in the silence. After a moment, a login screen appeared, requesting a username and password. Try your dad's ID number from the card, Eric suggested. I typed it in, but the system rejected it with an angry beep. Worth a shot. Look at this, Mia called from across the room. She stood before a wall of framed photographs. Scientists in lab coats, military personnel, and civilian administrators posed before various parts of the facility. One photo in particular caught my eye. My father standing next to a woman I recognized immediately as my mother. Between them stood a military officer whose nameplate read Colonel Henderson. Project Director Dr. Emily Grayson and Chief of Security William Grayson oversee final construction, 1996, Mia read from the caption. Chief of Security, I echoed, idled. My father was an electrician. Apparently not, Eric said grimly. And apparently your mom didn't run off with some guy. She was running this place. I stared at the photograph, my entire understanding of my family crumbling. What were they doing here? As if in answer, the lights flickered, and a distant bang echoed through the facility. We all froze, listening intently. After a moment of silence, Mia spoke. We should map this place, figure out what it is before going deeper. Good idea, I agreed, still rattled by the photo. Let's start with the rooms off this main area. The first door led to what appeared to be an administrative section. Office cubicles stood in silent rows, papers still scattered across desks, as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Bulletin boards displayed memos, schedules, and personal photos. Eric examined a whiteboard still bearing faded writing. Look at this. Evacuation protocol initiated April 17, 1998. That's the date of the earthquake. It wasn't an earthquake, I said, picking up a newspaper from a desk. The Blackridge Chronicle's headline read, "Minor earthquake rattles town, no injuries reported." I remember that, Mia said. My dad said it was strange there was no aftershock, and the geological surveys never officially confirmed it was an earthquake. I moved to a filing cabinet, pulling open a drawer labeled personnel. Inside were dozens of files, including ones for my parents. I pulled my mother's file first, flipping it open to find her credentials: PhD in molecular biology from MIT, former research scientist for DARPA, project director since 1995. She was never a software engineer, I murmured, remembering the cover story I'd been told growing up. My father's file was equally revealing: former military, specialized training in security systems, recruited specifically for Project Prometheus due to his unique qualifications and family connection. They were recruited as a package deal, Eric observed, reading over my shoulder. The brilliant scientist and the security expert who could keep her safe. And me, I asked bitterly, was I just their cover for living in a normal town? Mia put a hand on my shoulder. Let's keep looking. There must be more information about what this place was. We continued through the administrative section, finding nothing more revealing than project schedules and budget reports. The next area, however, made the hair on my arm stand up. A security office with monitors showing different sections of the facility. Most screens showed only empty corridors and darkened rooms, but one flickered with movement. The image was grainy, the lighting poor, but something had definitely moved across the camera's field of view in a section labeled Level 7 Containment. "We're not alone down here," Eric whispered unnecessarily. I checked the security console, finding a facility map that detailed 7 underground levels. We were currently on Level 1, which contained administration, security, and staff amenities. Level 2 held laboratories and research stations. Levels 3 through 6 were marked as observation and testing. Level 7, the deepest, was simply labeled Containment. What were they containing? Mia asked, voicing the question we were all thinking. "Let's find out," I replied, noting a stairwell marked on the map. "But stay together and stay alert." As we moved toward the stairwell, the lights flickered again, and the distant sound, like metal scraping against concrete, echoed through the complex. We paused, listening, but it didn't repeat. "Could be the ventilation system," I suggested, not believing it myself. "Sure," Mia agreed, equally unconvinced. Ancient ventilation systems always sound exactly like something dragging itself through dark corridors. The stairwell was utilitarian, concrete steps with metal railings, emergency lighting casting everything in a dim red glow. We descended to Level 2, emerging into a long corridor lined with laboratory doors. The first lab we entered was clearly for general research. Microscopes, centrifuges, and other standard equipment arranged on long tables. Computer stations sat idle, their screens dark. Whiteboards covered in complex formulas and diagrams lined the walls. "Look at this," Eric called, pointing to a sealed glass case containing what appeared to be biological samples. "These are tissue cultures, preserved somehow despite the power being out for, 20 years? "Not out," I corrected. "The emergency systems have been running. My father made sure of that." Mia had discovered a filing cabinet and was leafing through research reports. According to this, Project Prometheus was a biological enhancement program. They were trying to create, God, this sounds crazy, evolutionarily advantaged humans. "Super soldiers," Eric suggested. "No, not exactly," Mia continued reading. "They weren't focusing on strength or speed. They were trying to enhance adaptability. The ability to survive in extreme conditions." "Like what?" I asked. "Like..." She flipped a page, her eyes widening. "Like prolonged isolation underground. Extended darkness. Limited food sources." She looked up at us. "They were preparing humans for some kind of apocalypse scenario." "Who were the test subjects?" Eric asked. Mia's expression darkened as she read further. "Local volunteers lured by promises of significant payment." mostly people down on their luck after the timber industry collapsed. The missing 17, Eric said grimly. And more before them, Mia added. This project had been running since 1995. I moved to another workstation, finding a computer that was still operational. The desktop contained dozens of video files labeled by date. I clicked on one from early 1996. The video showed a clinical-looking room where a man in a hospital gown sat on an examination table. A doctor in a lab coat stood beside him, asking questions about his vision. I can see better in the dark now, the man explained. It's weird. Everything has this blue tint when the lights are dim, but I can make out details I couldn't before. Any discomfort? The doctor asked. Just sensitivity to bright light. Sunlight gives me headaches now. I clicked another video, this one from late 1997. A different subject, a woman, was demonstrating incredible dexterity in a darkened room, navigating obstacles as if the room were fully lit. The treatments are working, a voice narrated. My mother's voice, I realized with a shock. Subjects show enhanced night vision, improved hearing, and increased tactile sensitivity. Side effects remain minimal in most cases. Most cases, Eric echoed ominously. I clicked on a video from April 1998, just days before the evacuation. The footage showed a secure observation room overlooking what appeared to be a residential area, an underground habitat designed to look like normal apartments. Inside, several subjects moved about, but their movements were strange, jerky, almost predatory. They communicated with gestures rather than words, and their eyes, when they looked toward the camera, reflected light like animals. Day 47 of full immersion testing, my mother's voice explained, now tense with concern. Subjects continue to adapt beyond projected parameters. Physical changes now include altered eye structure, enhanced musculature, and, most concerning, apparent ability to communicate without speaking. Dr. Henderson believes this is some form of heightened empathic awareness, but I disagree. They are developing into something new, something we didn't anticipate. The video cut off abruptly. Please tell me there's nothing like that still alive down here, Mia whispered. The lights flickered again, longer this time, and the scraping sound returned, closer, more deliberate. We need to go, I said, standing up. Now. Wait, Eric insisted, moving to another computer. Let me just check. He never finished his sentence. With a grinding screech, the ventilation grate above his head pulled free of its mounting, clattering to the floor. Eric looked up, just as something dropped from the duct, something that moved with terrible speed. I caught only a glimpse, pale skin, elongated limbs, a face that was human but not, before Mia yanked me toward the door. Run, she screamed. We sprinted down the corridor, Eric's terrified yell cutting off with sickening abruptness behind us. The stairwell door seemed miles away, the corridor stretching endlessly as emergency lights flashed warnings. Eric, I shouted, starting to turn back. No time. Mia pulled me forward as the lights went out completely, plunging the corridor into darkness. For a second, we were blind. Then my vision adjusted with surprising speed, the darkness resolving into shapes and shadows. We reached the stairwell, slamming the door behind us and racing upward. Behind us, something scraped against the door, then a bang as it hit the door with force. It's following us, Mia gasped as we emerged onto level 1. The exit, I panted. We need to. A scream echoed through the facility, Eric's voice filled with pain and terror. He's alive, I realized. We can't leave him. Mia grabbed my arm. Noah, we can't help him. We need to get out and get help. Before I could respond, the facility's intercom system crackled to life, a voice breaking through decades of silence. Noah. The voice was raspy, distorted, but unmistakable. My mother's voice. Security office. Now, while they're distracted. Mia and I stared at each other in shock, then turned and ran toward the security office we'd discovered earlier. We burst through the door, locking it behind us. The monitors showed chaos throughout the facility. On one screen, shadowy figures moved with frightening speed through the laboratories. Another showed Eric being dragged toward an elevator by two creatures that had once been human. He was still fighting, still alive. Mom, I called out, my voice breaking. Where are you? The main monitor flickered, showing a woman in her 60s, her face lined but recognizable, her eyes reflecting the camera's light like a cat's. "Not much time," she said, her words halting as if speech was difficult. "They've awakened, containment failing." "Mom," I breathed. "You're alive. You've been down here all this time." "Monitoring, containing." She looked away as if hearing something we couldn't. "William maintained systems, brought supplies, kept them sleeping." "The test subjects," Mia asked. "The people who were changed?" My mother nodded. "We made them. Our responsibility." Her expression hardened. "They've evolved beyond our predictions. Adapted. 26 years in darkness." "What happened in 1998? I demanded. "The earthquake." "Containment breach. Test subjects escaped initial holding. Military wanted to bomb facility. I convinced them. Let me stay. Monitor. Prevent escape." Her eyes, so strange now, fixed on me. "Your father helped, built systems, maintained perimeter. While letting everyone think you'd abandoned us," I said bitterly. "No choice. Dangerous for you to know." She looked away again, more urgently. "They're coming. Take this." She held up a small device, a thumb drive. "All files, all evidence. In my office, level 3. "We'll get you out too," I insisted. She shook her head. "Too late for me, changed too much, but can help you escape." She pressed a button off screen and one of the monitors showed a maintenance tunnel lighting up. "Emergency exit, leads to Forest Service Road." "What about Eric?" Mia asked. "We'll try to help your friend, but you must take evidence, expose project." My mother leaned closer to the camera. "More facilities, other towns, not just here." The lights flickered again and a crash sounded somewhere nearby. "Go," my mother urged. "Level 3, my office, then emergency exit, Sector 4. The monitor went dark. Mia grabbed my arm. "Noah, we need to move." I stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by revelations. My mother alive, my father complicit in a government cover-up, creatures that had once been human now hunting us through abandoned labs. "Noah," Mia shook me. "We need to go now." I nodded, pushing aside my shock. "Level 3, we get the evidence, then find the emergency exit." "And Eric?" I thought of the monitor showing him being dragged away, still fighting. "We'll try to find him on the way." But Mia, my mother's right. This is bigger than us. Whatever they created here, whatever they did to those people, the world needs to know. She nodded grimly. "Then let's move." The stairwell to level 3 was clear, but we moved cautiously, every shadow potentially concealing one of the facility's transformed inhabitants. The emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson, making it difficult to distinguish details. "I still can't believe your mother's been down here for 26 years, Mia whispered as we descended. "How did she survive?" "The same way they did, I guess," I replied grimly. "She adapted." Level 3 was designated Research Directors Section, according to the sign on the stairwell door. We emerged into a corridor more nicely appointed than those above. Carpeted floors, wood-paneled walls, even some artwork, though years of neglect had left everything coated in dust. "Which way to her office?" Mia asked, glancing nervously down the corridor. I consulted the facility map I'd memorized. East Wing should be the large office at the end. We moved quietly, checking each doorway as we passed. Most were standard offices or small conference rooms. Halfway down the corridor, Mia froze, holding up a hand for silence. A soft clicking sound came from somewhere ahead, rhythmic, almost like a form of communication. It grew louder, then fainter, as if whatever made it had crossed the corridor and continued away from us. "They're hunting," Mia whispered. After waiting a full minute of silence, we continued, finally reaching a door marked Dr. E. Grayson, Research Director. The door was locked, but a keypad beside it suggested electronic access. "Try your birthday," Mia suggested. I punched in the digits 091995, and the lock clicked open. Inside was a spacious office, largely untouched by time. A desk dominated the center of the room, with bookshelves lining the walls and framed diplomas hanging behind the desk. "Look for the thumb drive," I said, moving to the desk. Mia began searching the bookshelves while I examined the desk drawers. Most contained ordinary office supplies or technical papers too complex for me to understand quickly. The computer on the desk was off, and I didn't want to risk turning it on and drawing attention. "Noah," Mia called softly, standing before a section of bookshelf that seemed different from the rest. "I think I found something." The shelf she indicated contained family photos rather than books, me as a child, my father standing beside various construction projects, my mother receiving awards. Mia pressed on one photo, my parents' wedding picture, and with a soft click, the entire section of shelf swung outward, revealing a hidden safe. "Of course she'd hide it," I muttered, approaching the safe. "But what's the combination?" Mia examined the lock. "It's not numbers, it's letters." I studied the dial, which indeed had letters instead of numbers. A word then, something meaningful to her. I tried the obvious first, Prometheus, but the safe remained locked. Next I tried my name, then my father's, with the same result. What was important to her, Mia asked. What defined her? I thought back to my childhood, to the mother I'd known before she supposedly abandoned us. She'd been brilliant but warm, dedicated to her work but equally devoted to her family. Her favorite book had been mythology, I said suddenly, rotating the dial to spell Hephaestus. The safe clicked open. Hephaestus, Mia questioned. The god who gave Prometheus the fire to steal, I explained, pulling open the safe. Inside the safe was a small collection of items, a leather-bound journal similar to my father's, several microfilm reels, a set of keys, and the thumb drive my mother had mentioned. I pocketed the thumb drive and flipped through the journal quickly. "This is her personal record of the project," I murmured, scanning entries. She was documenting everything they didn't want in the official reports. Mia looked over my shoulder as I turned pages. What was Project Prometheus really about, Noah? I found an entry from early 1996 that seemed to answer her question. The military presented this as preparation for nuclear winter or prolonged underground habitation, adaptation to darkness, radiation resistance, efficient metabolism. But Henderson has another agenda. The subjects aren't being prepared to survive an apocalypse. They're being designed to thrive in it. The genetic modifications are more extensive than initially disclosed. We're not enhancing humans. We're transforming them into something else entirely. They were playing God, Mia whispered. And it backfired, I replied, turning to the final entries from April 1998. The changes have accelerated beyond our models. Subject 12 demonstrated telepathic connection with Subject 7 during isolated testing. Subjects 3, 5, and 9 have developed physical adaptations we never programmed. Altered eye structure, enhanced musculature, dermal changes that allow for better heat retention. They're evolving on their own now, following some pattern we don't understand. Henderson wants to proceed to Phase 3, but I've refused. The subjects are becoming increasingly difficult to control. They no longer respond to verbal commands. They watch us constantly, communicating among themselves in ways we can't detect. Yesterday, Subject 1 escaped containment for 3 hours by manipulating the electronic lock, a skill he couldn't possibly have learned. I've recommended immediate termination of the project, but I'm being overruled. God help us all. The final entry was dated April 17, 1998. They're free. God forgive me for what we've done. A distant scream, unmistakably Eric's, echoed through the facility, jolting us back to our present danger. We need to move, Mia urged, tugging my arm. We have what we came for. I nodded, tucking the journal into my jacket alongside the thumb drive. The emergency exit is in Sector 4, 1 level down. As we prepared to leave, the office phone rang, startling us both. After 3 rings, it connected to the speakerphone automatically. Noah, my mother's voice came through, still that strange, raspy tone. They have your friend in containment, level 7. Can you help him? I asked, my voice tight. Trying, but difficult. They see me as one of them, mostly, but know I'm different. A pause, then, you must hurry. They sense you now, hunting. Mom, I said, the word strange on my tongue after believing her gone for so long. We can't just leave you here. Must, she insisted. To change now. Couldn't survive outside. Another pause. Been monitoring them for years, keeping them contained. Your father helped, built systems, maintained perimeter. Why didn't he tell me? I demanded. Why let me believe you'd abandoned us? Protecting you, she replied simply. Safer not knowing, safer away from Blackridge. The line crackled with interference. No more time. Go to level 4, sector 4. Maintenance shaft leads to surface, half-mile from town border. What about you? Mia asked. What will happen when we expose this place? My mother's laugh was hollow, barely recognizable. Long overdue, more facilities exist. More experiments must be stopped. The interference increased. Noah, forgive. The line went dead as the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness for several seconds before the emergency system engaged. We need to go, Mia said, though I could hear the conflict in her voice. We can't leave Eric, I replied, already knowing what I was going to do, and I can't leave without seeing her. Mia grabbed my shoulders. Noah, listen to me. Your mother has survived down here for decades. She knows this place and these creatures. Eric may already be. She couldn't finish the sentence. I know it's not logical, I admitted, but I have to try. You take the evidence, find the emergency exit. I'll go to level 7, try to find Eric and my mother. That's suicide, she protested. Maybe, but I can't live with myself if I don't try. I pressed the journal and thumb drive into her hands. Get this to the surface. Contact your newspaper connections, anyone who will listen. Make sure the world knows what happened here. Mia stared at me for a long moment, then pulled me into a fierce hug. I'm not leaving you, she said into my shoulder. We go together. Before I could argue, the building's intercom crackled to life, a strange clicking sound emanating from the speakers before resolving into words. My mother's voice, but even more distorted than before. Noah, Mia, can you hear me? Yes, I replied, looking up at the ceiling speaker. They've taken your friend to level 7, testing chamber A, still alive. Her voice faded in and out, as if she was struggling to form words. Can create diversion, draw most away, give you chance to reach him. Then what? Mia asked. Emergency protocol still functional. Facility self-destruct. 30-minute countdown. Time to reach escape shaft. Self-destruct, I echoed. Mom, you'd be killing yourself. Been dead for years, she replied flatly. Just didn't know it. This place must end. Contained too long already. I closed my eyes, grief and determination warring within me. How do we get to level 7 without being detected? Service elevator, back of this corridor. Using my access code will register as normal maintenance. She paused. When you reach level 7, you'll have 5 minutes. When alarm sounds, run for escape shaft. Don't look back, don't wait. I understand, I said, though the words felt like ash in my mouth. Activate elevator with code 7394 Emily, another pause. Noah, proud of you, always was. The intercom went silent. Mia and I looked at each other, unspoken understanding passing between us. This was suicide, likely for all of us, but we couldn't leave Eric behind, and I couldn't leave without at least trying to save the mother I'd thought lost forever. Let's go, I said, moving toward the door. We found the service elevator where my mother had indicated, at the end of a maintenance corridor behind a heavy fire door. The elevator itself was small, designed for equipment rather than people, with bare metal walls and harsh, fluorescent lighting. I entered the code, and the elevator hummed to life, descending smoothly toward the deepest level of the facility. What's the plan when we get there? Mia asked, her voice steady despite the fear I knew she must be feeling. My mother said she'd create a diversion. We find Eric, get him to the escape shaft, and get out before the place blows. I tried to sound confident, but we both knew our chances were slim. The elevator slowed, then stopped with a soft chime. The doors slid open to reveal a dimly lit corridor much different from the levels above. Here, the walls were reinforced with steel plates, the floor bare concrete. Heavy security doors lined the passage, each with a small observation window and electronic lock. Testing chambers, Mia whispered, where they kept the subjects. We stepped out cautiously, listening for any sound of movement. The corridor was eerily silent, the only noise the soft hum of emergency lighting. Chamber A, I murmured, checking the designations on the doors. That way. We moved as quietly as possible, every sense straining for signs of danger. The corridor branched several times, but we followed the signs, drawing ever deeper into the containment level. Finally, we reached a set of double doors marked Testing Chamber A's Observation. Beside it was another door labeled Testing Chamber A Interior. Both were securely locked. "How do we get in?" Mia whispered. Before I could answer, a distant alarm began to wail, followed by the sound of movement, fast, purposeful movement, from deeper in the facility. The diversion, I realized. The electronic lock on the observation room door suddenly flashed green, clicking open. "Mom," I breathed, pushing the door open. The observation room was a small space dominated by a large one-way window looking into the testing chamber. Computer terminals lined one wall, monitoring equipment on another. Through the window, we could see a large, open area designed to mimic a natural cave system, with rock formations and multiple levels connected by rough-hewn staircases. In the center of the space, Eric was tied to a chair, bloodied but conscious. Around him, 3 figures moved with predatory grace, humanoid but clearly altered. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, their limbs longer than normal, their movements unnervingly quick and precise. Their eyes, when they turned toward the light, reflected it like animals. "Oh God," Mia gasped. "What did they do to those people?" "They evolved them," came a voice from behind us. We whirled to find my mother standing in the doorway, but not as I remembered her. She was gaunt, her once brown hair now white and sparse. Her skin had the same pale translucency as the creatures in the chamber, and when she looked at me, her eyes reflected the light just like theirs. But unlike them, she still walked and talked like a human. She still recognized me. "Mom," I whispered, taking an involuntary step toward her. She held up a hand, stopping me. "No time. Diversion won't last. Most went to check perimeter breach, but will return soon." Her speech was halting, as if English was now difficult for her. "Your friend's still alive. Need to move quickly." "How do we get him out?" Mia asked, glancing at the 3 creatures still circling Eric. My mother moved to a control panel, her fingers dancing across the keys with surprising dexterity, creating gas release. "We'll disorient them briefly. When they collapse, enter chamber, free your friend, exit through there." She pointed to a maintenance door on the far side of the testing chamber. "Leads to ventilation shaft. Follow to sector 4, find escape tunnel." "What about you?" I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. She met my eyes, and for a moment, I saw her as she once was, the brilliant, compassionate woman who had read me bedtime stories and taught me about the stars. "I stay," she said simply. "Ensure facility destruction. Ensure nothing escapes." "Mom, please." "No choice, Noah." She turned back to the controls. "Accepted this fate long ago. Small price for what we did here." She pressed a final button and alarm lights began to flash. "Go." 30-minute countdown initiated. Gas releasing now. Through the window, we watched as a fine mist sprayed from vents in the ceiling of the testing chamber. The creatures looked up, suddenly alert, then began to stagger, their movements becoming uncoordinated. Within seconds, they had collapsed to the floor. "Now," my mother urged, pressing another button to unlock the interior door. Mia and I rushed into the chamber, running to Eric. He looked up at us with dazed disbelief. "You came back," he croaked, his voice raw. "Of course we did," Mia replied, working to untie his restraints. "They were studying me," Eric said, his words slurring slightly. "Said I was unmodified, a control subject." "Don't talk," I advised, helping him to his feet once Mia had freed him. "We need to move." Eric was weak but able to walk with our support. We hurried toward the maintenance door my mother had indicated, pausing only when she called my name. "Noah." I turned to see her standing in the observation room doorway, one hand pressed against the glass. "I'm sorry," she said, her distorted voice somehow conveying genuine emotion, "for everything." "I know," I replied, my throat tight. "I understand now." She nodded once, then stepped back. "Go, don't look back." With Eric between us, Mia and I pushed through the maintenance door into a narrow utility passage. Behind us, an automated voice began counting down over the facility's intercom system. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 29 minutes to complete evacuation. The passage was cramped, forcing us to move in single file with Eric between Mia and me. It wound through the facility's infrastructure, past ventilation equipment, electrical junctions, and water pipes. Occasionally we passed grates that looked down into other chambers, giving us glimpses of the facility's secrets. One grate revealed what appeared to be a dormitory, beds arranged in neat rows, personal effects still in place, as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Another showed a massive chamber filled with complex equipment surrounding what looked like cultivation tanks, large glass cylinders where test subjects might have been kept during treatment. "Hurry," Mia urged as Eric stumbled. "We need to reach Sector 4. The countdown continued, marking our dwindling time. 25 minutes, 23, 20. We reached a junction where the passage split in 3 directions. A faded sign indicated sectors 3, 4, and 7. "This way," I said, pointing towards Sector 4. As we turned down the passage, a horrifying sound reached us, the clicking communication of the creatures coming from somewhere behind us. "They're following," Eric gasped. "Move faster," I urged, though Eric was already at his limit. The passage began to slope upward, a good sign we were heading toward the surface. The going was harder now, with Eric weakening and the creatures gaining behind us. 15 minutes to complete evacuation, the automated voice announced. We reached another junction, this one with a ladder leading upward through a narrow shaft. "The escape route," Mia said with relief. "It has to be." I went first, climbing rapidly to ensure the way was clear. At the top was a small landing with a heavy metal door. I pushed it open, revealing a crude tunnel supported by wooden beams. Older than the facility, perhaps a mining passage repurposed for the emergency exit. "Send Eric up," I called down. Together, Mia and I hauled Eric up the ladder, his face pale with exhaustion and pain. Just as we pulled him onto the landing, the clicking sound intensified below us, and a pale hand grabbed the bottom rung of the ladder. "Go," I shouted, shoving them through the door into the tunnel. I slammed it shut behind us, finding a simple bolt lock and sliding it home. It wouldn't hold them long, but maybe long enough. The tunnel was low-ceilinged and narrow, forcing us to crouch as we moved forward. Ancient support beams creaked ominously overhead, soil occasionally shifting between the planks. 10 minutes to complete evacuation, came the muffled announcement from behind us. We pushed forward, Eric between us, his arms over our shoulders. The tunnel seemed endless, each bend revealing only more darkness ahead. "There," Mia suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a faint light ahead. "That has to be the exit." We surged forward with renewed strength, the light growing stronger. Behind us, a crash echoed through the tunnel, the sound of the metal door giving way. "They're through," Eric gasped. "Almost there," I encouraged, though my own lungs were burning with exertion. The light resolved into a crude, wooden door, daylight streaming through cracks in the planks. I reached it first, throwing my weight against it. The aged wood splintered, and we tumbled out into the blinding sunlight of the forest. We were on a wooded hillside, the town of Blackridge visible in the valley below. The exit was concealed within what appeared to be an abandoned mining shaft, its entrance overgrown with vegetation. 5 minutes to complete evacuation, came the faint voice from the tunnel. "We need to get farther away," Mia urged. Supporting Eric between us, we stumbled down the hillside, putting as much distance as possible between ourselves and the hidden entrance. We had made it perhaps a quarter mile when the ground beneath us shuddered. "Get down," I shouted, pulling both Mia and Eric to the ground. The explosion wasn't what I expected. No fireball, no massive blast. Instead, the earth convulsed as if in pain, a deep rumbling emanating from below. Trees swayed, their roots straining against the moving earth. In the distance, I could see the town of Blackridge shake, buildings trembling but holding. Then, with a final shudder, the ground settled. Where the mining entrance had been, the hillside had collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but a depression filled with broken trees and disturbed earth. "It's over," Eric whispered, but as I stared at the collapsed entrance, I wasn't so sure. There was no way to know if the destruction had been complete, if all the creatures had been contained. And what about my mother? Had she stood her ground in the control room, ensuring the self-destruct sequence completed correctly, or had she tried to escape at the last moment? And how many other facilities existed, as she had warned? How many other experiments were still ongoing? "We need to get to a hospital," Mia said, examining a deep cut on Eric's arm. I nodded numbly, still staring at the collapsed hillside. "And then we need to tell the world what happened here." "Will anyone believe us?" Eric asked weakly. I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the thumb drive and journal safely tucked inside. "They'll have to." As we made our slow way down toward town, I glanced back one final time at the place where I'd found and lost my mother in the space of hours. In the growing dusk, I thought I saw movement at the edge of the depression, a pale figure standing unnaturally still, watching us descend. Then I blinked, and it was gone. Or perhaps it had never been there at all. 3 months later, Mia and I sat in her small apartment in Portland, watching the congressional hearing on television. The evidence we'd provided, my mother's journal, the files on the thumb drive, our testimonies, had sparked the biggest government scandal since Watergate. Project Prometheus and its sister projects in other towns had been exposed, leading to arrests, resignations, and ongoing investigations. Eric was still recovering both physically and mentally, but had become something of a celebrity in conspiracy theory circles. "I told you so" had become his catchphrase on the interview circuit. "Senator, can you explain how a project of this magnitude operated without proper oversight for nearly 30 years? The committee chairwoman was asking a nervous-looking military official. I tuned out his stammering response, my attention drawn to the window where rain streamed down the glass, distorting the view of the city beyond. "You okay?" Mia asked, her hand finding mine. "Just thinking about my parents," I replied. "All those years, my father maintaining the systems, bringing supplies down, protecting the town while my mother kept those things contained. They were heroes in their own way," Mia said gently. "They made a terrible mistake, but they spent the rest of their lives trying to make it right." I nodded, but couldn't shake the unease that had followed me since our escape. The official report stated that the facility had been completely destroyed, with no survivors. Ground-penetrating radar showed nothing but collapsed tunnels and crushed rooms beneath Blackridge. Yet sometimes, in the darkest hours of night, I would wake to the sound of soft clicking, a sound like communication, only to find my apartment empty and silent. And twice now, I'd glimpsed a pale figure watching me from the shadows, vanishing when I turned to look directly at it. "Do you ever wonder," I began, then hesitated, "if some of them survived?" Mia finished for me. She squeezed my hand. "Every day." On the television, the hearing continued, officials promising transparency and accountability, but I knew better. Some secrets went deeper than government projects and classified files. Some changes couldn't be undone. And sometimes, what emerges from the darkness is more terrifying than anything we can imagine, because it was us who created it, us who changed it, us who set it free. I glanced at my laptop, where an email had arrived earlier that day from an anonymous sender. It contained only a string of numbers, coordinates, I realized, and 5 words that had kept me awake since reading them. "There are more. Keep looking." The message was unsigned, but I didn't need a signature to recognize the warning. Some part of my mother had survived, was still fighting, still trying to make amends for the horror she had helped create. And now, that fight was mine.